Good morning, it's Shanna. This week I wanted to do kind of just a walkthrough of how I communicate with my ancestors. I had a question on one of my last videos about how I do that. This is not a deck I use for that. I wanted to use one of those decks, but it felt weird. The practice is sort of very specific to a handful of my decks, and I didn't really want to use those because it felt too personal. However, I chose another deck that I don't use for ancestor work, and I will show you how I do it, what I do, what my method is, what my questions are, and how I kind of get from A to Z. So the first thing I want to mention is, for me at least, I'm pretty particular on when and where I do these readings. I have to make sure I'm home by myself. I don't want anyone else here. I don't want to feel self-conscious. I don't like thinking that anyone else is listening to me or thinking I'm weird or, whatever those things are. And that's likely a me thing. But if those things also bother you, consider trying to do this, away from other people. If that's not possible for you, maybe go, if that's not possible where, within your space, but those are things that concern you, go for a drive. Take your deck and go for a drive. Go to a park, whatever you have to do to make the space comfortable for you, both mentally and physically, because it's very important to me to feel completely connected to whoever it is I'm trying to communicate with. And if I'm constantly hearing like the TV in the background, or having to move my chair in because someone wants to get past, or, someone comes up with a question, I also mute my phone, completely mute it. I don't put it on vibrate. And it's generally even just in the other room, just so that I'm not bothered by it whatsoever. A couple of things I like to do when I communicate with my grandma, I like to make a cup of coffee for both of us. And I drink mine while I'm sitting here, and then hers is also sitting here. I have a special cup and saucer set. They're matching, and so one's for her, one's for me, and I use those only when I'm doing a tarot reading with her. So it's just kind of my little special, and it's kind of a way of making an offering while also, sharing in that moment something that I know that she enjoyed and that we also shared together, before she passed. And especially when I was little, she would make me coffee and put honey in it. So I'll often, have black coffee with honey, where normally I have coffee and cream. Little things like that. When I finally get around to chatting with my stepdad, who's no longer here, I initially bought a pack of loose tobacco because he was a smoker. And when I did attempt to do a reading, and two things happened. One, I don't think I had the right deck for it. It wasn't his deck. When I was using it, it just didn't feel quite right. And also because I bought loose tobacco versus cigarettes, it just didn't quite help me feel connected. So I think the next time I try it, I will buy a box of cigarettes, which feels so weird because I'm not a smoker. I don't buy cigarettes, but I think I will go ahead and do that. And just so that I can have them here, so that I can kind of have that smell, which cigarettes and cigarette smoke lightly. I don't want to go into a smoky bar, but cigarette smoke generally just doesn't bother me. I kind of grew up with it. So it's just, again, it's another way to connect with him on kind of this very, because scent is very I don't know the term, but scent helps us remember. I think scent is probably one of the strongest senses that helps us remember. So I think he would like that. He would probably get a kick out of knowing that I went to the store and bought a box of cigarettes. So whatever that looks like for you, if you're working with an ancestor or a relative that you knew, I guess maybe you're not going to know an ancestor, but maybe you knew of them. Maybe you have journal entries or stories about them. And if you don't, honestly, so one of my ancestors that I communicate with, her name was Mary. I didn't know anything about her until a couple of years ago. And I I went to the thrift store and I looked for a teacup because she came from England. She rowed the boat here. She didn't literally row it. She sailed here. Thank you, words. She sailed here from England to settle in America, and it's a pretty safe assumption that she drank and enjoyed tea. So I did. I just went to the thrift store and I kind of just wandered the aisles. I took my time. I knew that I was looking for a teacup, and I just waited until one felt right, and I bought it, and it came with a saucer, and so now that is her special teacup and saucer. I make tea when I sit and do readings with her, and I have like a little tiny altar. I'll take a picture if I can remember. I'll take a picture and insert it here. I just made a little altar. It's, like a candle with kind of a wooden top, and I have her image. I have a tiny little, it's an old Avon decanter that I put water in, fresh water. And if I remember right, I've got a couple little crystals, and then I have the teacup there as well. So it's just kind of her altar. It's where I can go to visit with her if I want just if I just want to do a quick check-in. But I will bring those things up with me, is my point. And if I want to do a reading with her, I'll bring those things up, set them up around me while I pull out the tarot. So, on tarot, I enjoy finding a deck for the specific person. I've only communicated with my grandmother Mary, with my grandmother, so my mom's mom, and I've attempted to communicate with my stepdad. So just those 3 people right now, but I have done past life readings where I also have a specific deck. And so each of those people have their own deck that I work with, and I don't use those decks for anything else. My point in telling you all of that is if you have, one deck that you use for all the things, do that. If that's what you can do, right? You don't have to have a specific deck. If you have a big collection, I suggest going through them and sort of having a conversation with it. I like to do an interview sometimes with a deck, like, hey, how do you feel about working with this particular person? Do a reading with the deck, ask the deck these questions. I recently did that with the Blood Moon Tarot. I have a specific job for it now, and that was a lot of fun. Having a conversation with a deck of cards is pretty amazing. I think you will be surprised at how well it communicates with you if it's the right deck for that job. So, okay, enough rambling. Let's get on with the how I do it. So once I have my things here, my offerings, I'm by myself, my house is quiet. If you want to use music, if that helps you connect to whoever it is you're trying to speak with, communicate with, do that. And this is all kind of just trial and error at the end of the day. I would say, give yourself some time. I would say an easy hour so that you don't feel rushed. But all of this is kind of personal. Some ancestors may be quicker to speak with you, and maybe you're faster at processing the meanings, etc. So again, it's kind of trial and error. Find your deck, find the things that you want to have around you, figure out how long you need. Again, if you're just starting, I would start with just an hour. Okay, I'm rambling. So the next thing I would suggest, the next thing I do is I pull out my journal and I get just a scrap piece of paper. Not scrap, but something that I can write on. This is the paper I use, so this is the one I would pull out. And then depending on how sloppy it is, which it's probably going to be sloppy, I will just go ahead and rewrite once I'm done with the whole ritual. So the first thing I do, obviously, or not, light your candle if that's something you want to do, and shuffle the cards. And while you're shuffling, shuffle better than that. Look at this. That's embarrassing. So yes, shuffle your cards, shuffle your deck. And while I'm shuffling, I will sort of make my intentions known to the deck. I will say, my intent here today is to oh my gosh, I can't shuffle, is to communicate with, you know, Bob. We'll call him Bob. My intention is to communicate with Bob today. And I actually have a thing that I like to say because it feels like an important step to me. And I got this from somewhere. So if you recognize this, just ignore, it's scrap paper. If you recognize this, I'm making my announcement now. This is not something I, came up with. Someone, I don't know if it was a video or out of a book. I invite my wise and well ancestor Bob to come and talk with me today. I have questions for him, or I would like to get to know him better. And then will the ancestor who has experience in this area come forth and help me? Or I will say, Bob, will you come forward and help me, or come forward and speak with me today? Something along those lines. I like to make sure that I say out loud, if that's how I'm doing it. Some people prefer to do it in their head, which if I'm by myself, I'm perfectly willing to say it out loud. But I do like to say that with only good intentions. Bob, I'd like to speak with you, but only with good intentions. You're invited here with love and light, however you want to word that. I kind of like to put it out there that, if Bob, who maybe I don't know, if Bob was actually maybe a bad guy, maybe I don't necessarily want to talk with him. So maybe on that particular day he wouldn't come because I'm not inviting that energy. So all of that aside, next thing I would do, I'm generally going to have an idea of what I want to ask. I don't do spreads, or haven't done spreads to communicate with my ancestors. I know that was one of the things you specifically asked. Up to this point, I haven't. I just come to the table with a set of questions or an idea of something I want to learn about them. So that's why I have the paper, because I'll shuffle the deck, and my favorite way to do it is to shuffle until I get a jumper. And especially when I'm communicating, because I feel like that's an affirmation, confirmation that, the ancestor has answered me. So here's a jumper. So let's say I asked Bob, I guess we could start with the basics. How are you today? Sometimes I don't really know where to start. So I will start with something simple like that. How are you today? When I get the card, I will quickly jot down, how are you today? And then I will write the card, Princess of Swords. Now there's a couple different things that I will do here. Depending on who it is, how much time I have, sometimes when I sit down, I don't quite feel, how sometimes you'll sit down with the tarot deck and you're like, yes, I'm in it. I can feel the energy. Everything's aligned perfectly. And all the cards are coming and they're answering me. And then other times you come and you get a card and you're like, okay, and so if I come to the table and the stars have aligned for me and I ask a question and I get a card and I immediately know what that card means, I will make a note. It doesn't have to be long necessarily. I'll make a note, what the card was, what my question was. Absolutely remember to write down what your question was, because for me, once I get through this process, I will never remember what question I asked to get, the card. So question, answer, and then if you want to jot down your initial thoughts, just shorthand, just very, very quickly. Or if it works better for you, start journaling on it. Make that your initial journal entry portion. So once you've done that, once I have done that first question, for me, my method is that I prefer to move on to the next. I'll write the question, the card, and usually I don't write yet what I think, usually. So my next step then, once I've written the two things down, the question and the answer, I move on to my next question. And sometimes, especially with my grandma, I will come to the table to ask her a question about what she thinks about something that I'm doing. Because, you know, I used to go to her for advice a lot. You know, what should I do with this boyfriend or whatever? This was back in the day, right? So maybe if I was here and Uncle Bob was my mentor, someone I looked up to, I'm struggling to decide on whether or not I should take this job. What do you think? What do you think about me taking this job? You know, and I'm going to shuffle until I get a card. We'll take that guy. And then I just go through the same process. I will write down, what do you think about my taking this job? And then I would write down Queen of Wands. And again, if something immediately hits me, something that really feels like it's his answer or something that's relevant, then I will write that down quickly. I will jot it down. And I just do that over and over until I feel like the reading is done. You know, I'll just ask multiple questions. Maybe he says, you know, this Queen of Wands. And then I say, well, you're right, but, you know, John at work will be my boss if I take the position, and I'm not sure how I feel about that. So then you ask your next question of, how well am I going to fit into this position if John's my boss, right? So you flip, shuffle, shuffle, till you get another jumper. Again, and you write down your question, how will I feel if I get this position with John as my boss? And then you write down the card. Okay, so once I feel like I've asked my questions, and I don't necessarily have to be done, but once I've gotten the cards that I feel like answers that initial question or concern, then I'm going to come back and I'm going to pull out the guidebook. This is the fun part for me. This is like the meat of the meat and potatoes. So I will flip open to this first one, which was Princess of Swords. And I'll go back to my original question, which was, what was it? How are you today? Let's move on to the next one. So let's say that this was my second one. So my second one was, you know, how do you feel about me taking the job? This is why we write it down. I don't know if that was the question. I think that was the question. So my question was, how do you feel about me taking this job? And the card was Princess of Swords. So now I'm going to come in here and I'm going to read this once through. I'll just read the whole thing once through and take note of things that jump out. Are there things in here that, does it reference a color that Uncle Bob liked? Does it reference, you know, seeing clearly, and did Uncle Bob wear glasses? Does it reference silver blue wings? Did Uncle Bob have a wingback car, or, you know, a little crown of silver, holds a letter in her hands? Did he have a special letter opener? There's certain things that more than likely are going to jump out at you that you're going to be like, oh my gosh, they're going to confirm that he's the one answering your questions. So really, truly, I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it. This is my favorite part. So you're going to read through it. The blue butterfly, you know, the color blue has come up twice. Was his favorite animal a butterfly? Dance around her in the forest. Was he a dancer? Childlike interest in the letter he reads. You know, was he a professional writer? And so on and so forth. So as you go along and you read, you can either highlight, or again, that's another good reason why, if this deck is specific to Uncle Bob, it doesn't matter if you highlight or flag or make notes in this book, because it will always be his. So answering that question, I would write down, you know, I asked Uncle Bob how he felt about it, and the book mentions these blue butterflies, which was his favorite butterfly. And so sometimes this card will spur another question of, okay, I know you're here. I remember that blue butterfly was your favorite butterfly. What is that signaling? I'm not sure if that's, you know, I don't know if you're telling me I should take it or I shouldn't take it. Help me out here. What does the blue butterfly signify for you? And we've got another quick jumper. We have the Two of Pentacles. So at this point, where I've kind of already stopped the main reading, I would go ahead and write the question. And I highly suggest, this is another tip, I would write the question as you think it before you start to shuffle. So write your question, shuffle the cards to get your jumper, and then write the card. Because again, at least for me, even if I ask the question in my head, if it takes a couple minutes to shuffle, sometimes I let my eyes, go into soft focus, and I sort of just let my brain flow with the shuffling of the cards, and I tend to forget my question. So it's very important for me, at least, and my tip to you is to write that question down before you shuffle. So, and then we just rinse and repeat, right? So we would go to Two of Pentacles. So we asked, I know I know the blue butterfly was your favorite, but I'm not sure if that's telling me I should or I shouldn't. I'm not sure if that's a confirmation or like a warning, right? So then we come in here, one card answer, yes. I mean, this would be a beautiful deck to be able to answer those yes and no questions because it's telling you right here. So, but if that's not there, a lot of decks don't have that. So we've got a landscape of duality. Maybe Uncle Bob's unsure. He's like, I don't actually know, kid. With one side of the forest in a snowy winter, the other side at night with a crescent moon, woodland creature peering out. 9 times out of 10, you're going to read through this and you're going to pick something up that's relevant to Uncle Bob and your relationship. That's pretty much the entire process of how I do readings with ancestors. It's a lot of fun. It's relaxing. It kind of pulls me out of the real world, the day-to-day. It allows me to play with my intuition. It allows me to use the guidebook, which, sometimes can be underutilized. And then it allows me to journal. And that's another part of this, that the journaling part takes a lot of time. So to allot yourself enough time in the beginning to be able to complete this, because I feel like once you get up from the table and you walk away, that reading is over and you kind of lose that sense of connection to whoever it is you're speaking with. One of the questions I asked my grandmother was I wanted confirmation that my coming to her in this way was okay. I don't remember the way I asked her, but I asked her, is this bothering you? Is this okay? Do you like me coming to you with this? Confirm for me that this is an okay practice for you and me to do together. That was another fun one where, when I popped open the book, it was immediately apparent that she was more than happy to be here in this moment with me, communicating through the cards. So that's a fun question that I like to ask, and if they were someone who maybe suffered at the end or was uncomfortable, if you will, I like to ask, are you comfortable now? Are you in a safe place? I don't really want to ask if they're happy necessarily, because I'm not sure what that means specifically for someone who's not here on earth anymore, but asking them personal questions. It doesn't all necessarily have to be about you. You can ask them fun questions. You can be like, what do you think of tarot? What do you think of Timmy's performance last night? It can be whatever question you want. Just writing those questions down as you ask the question, writing the card down as soon as you get the card, and then being able to take the time to journal afterwards and using the guidebook. Because like I said, this is the most important part to me, because I feel like the messages in the guidebook is what that person is telling you. So that's pretty much it. At the end of the reading, I thank them for being here with me. I blow out the candle, I dispose of whatever food or drink that maybe I have offering them. And I tell them, obviously that part's going to come last, but I thank them for being here and tell them that I look forward to the next time that we chat, because I want them to know that I'm going to come back, that this practice will happen again. So yeah, that's my entire practice. Something else you might want to do, I enjoy using a specific oil when I do these ancestor readings. I don't like to put it on the palms of my hands because I don't like to get my cards oily, but I'll do a little drop on the backs of my hands and I'll rub it here till it's basically absorbed, and then I'll do a little bit like this just to get the scent, but not so much the oils. So yeah, that's pretty much the whole practice. I hope that answered your question and hopefully it was clear. If you have questions, feel free to ask, and that's kind of it. Thanks for joining me. Thank you for asking such a thoughtful question, and I hope that you come back again. I'll talk to you later.